I have now seen both Superman and the Fantastic Four. Today, we're going to be reviewing the Fantastic Four and comparing the two of them. If you are one of those people that fancies fable, fiction, film, tall tales, and high adventure, this is the channel for you. If you would, go ahead, click like, click subscribe. That way you'll know about my future videos. It helps support the channel, and it also helps my compulsion to keep creating these videos and tell you more about the art of storytelling. Now, July has fully hit. The blockbuster movie-going theater experience in 2025 is in full force. Critics will be comparing two films this July, one being Superman, the other one being the Fantastic Four. I would like to indulge in that a little bit. I am not too concerned with what is going to be the box office hit or which one is going to be reviewed by critics better or theater goers better. I'm going to tell you which one I thought was a better story and which one utilized the characters better. One of them is attempting to reboot a franchise, and the other one is attempting to revive it. And as I might have said in the previous video, my love for the Fantastic Four is rooted in the source material, namely everything Stan Lee had written. The Silver Surfer. If you have at all followed my channel, you'll know that the Silver Surfer is my favorite superhero in all of comics. He's truly amazing. As he's on a biblical level, he sacrificed his entire, not only his life, but for all of eternity, his soul in servitude to this planet eater to save his entire race, or I should say his entire planet of Zen-La. Unlike Superman, there has not been the great Fantastic Four movie. There's been several iterations of it, and all of them have been poor. I've enjoyed some of them just because they are the Fantastic Four, but they are still lacking in their theatrical greatness, as of Superman, the Richard Donner one did not. So these are a bunch of really great characters, unbelievable ancillary characters. I look forward to giving you my take on these as we get going. At the end, I'll tell you which one of these films I thought was better. I will try to keep the spoilers to a minimum. Here is my review of the Fantastic Four. Both Superman and the Fantastic Four have had multiple iterations. To this point, all the Fantastic Four has had as far as good theater-going experience is The Incredibles. Yeah, now I know The Incredibles is not the Fantastic Four, but it's literally a copy of the Fantastic Four. It's the family dynamic. It took all of the things that were great from the Fantastic Four and implemented them into this. Pixar just showed, Disney, Marvel, or Fox in the previous case. This is how you tell this story. Creators of the Fantastic Four in the past haven't done that until now. Now, very much like Superman, the Fantastic Four is pretty much ground zero or the foundation for all of Marvel Comics. It was also the spark to everything that was new to the comic book industry. Even though DC had been going along to that point, Marvel transformed it. There was even a prototype, and I'm going to give a lot more credit to Jack Kirby, the creator of the Fantastic Four, than I will to Stan Lee. Jack Kirby at the time was working for DC Comics, and he had created what was called a prototype. Many of the great characters and teams all had prototypes. Most of them had prototypes of some sort before they actually came out. Challengers of the Unknown, number 3, was pretty much a prototype for the Fantastic Four. It was just in DC Comics. It was one character with all of those powers, but there was a family or a group. Fast forward a few years to 1961, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are working together. They needed to come up with a team concept. Jack Kirby brings some of his ideas from a previous prototype. Stan Lee puts the finishing touches on this brilliant idea, which, at the time was groundbreaking. There were no family teams. There was no teams that had this type of synchronicity and unity up until this point. Stan Lee's contribution pretty much was the heart and the soul of this being a family that worked as well as they did together, as well as bickering together as they would. Stan and Jack are actually in the movie, not the actual individuals, but the the characters, and if you blink, you'll miss it. As we go along, I'm going to give you some comparisons between Superman and the Fantastic Four. I wasn't able to do that with my Superman review just because I hadn't seen the Fantastic Four yet, but they're relative. Thankfully, coming out of this, this was a very entertaining movie. It had a very different feel to it than Superman. Superman was big, exciting, lots of action, lots of fun. This was much more serious, and this had a much darker tone with stakes that were much higher and much more serious. And as the obstacles were presented, these seemed to be more insurmountable, and also some of the consequences of the decisions that they chose as they went along were much more impactful to the public, so to speak, than, say, in the Superman movie. Now, the feel of it, and this was interesting, I hadn't quite, as I said, it was serious, but, it felt like Interstellar. At times, it felt like a little bit like The Right Stuff, just because of the implications of what this group was doing for Earth. Also, a lot like Armageddon, but it didn't have the corniness of Armageddon as much. And then here's the biggest thread that I noticed throughout it was this seemed a lot like a J.J. Abrams Star Trek re-envision musically, because A, it was the same music and the same composer, and B, just like there's this birth scene in the middle of the movie of Franklin Richards that was so reminiscent of the beginning scene of the first Star Trek movie it was played by Chris Hemsworth at the time, who played Kirk's father, and they have the birth of Kirk in that. Those two scenes were very similar, and not only that, just the visuals of it, the interiors of the ship and whatnot, it felt very J.J. Abrams-esque. Additionally, it also had elements of Godzilla. Godzilla movies when he's coming out of the water and he's attacking these large cities. Those scenes with Galactis felt very much like that. Now, I gave some of the highest accolades possible to the casting of the Superman characters. I have to do the same thing here. I do that in a way that's like, I did not agree until I saw the movie. So, and by the way, out of all of the castings and star power in any of these two films, Pedro Pascal was the biggest draw for all of them. I'm not a Pedro Pascal fan, and I don't dislike him. I just don't have any enthusiasm for him like everybody else does. He hasn't been in anything that really wowed me, and I did not see him as Mr. Fantastic or in this. They don't use any of the characters' superhero names. They use their real names. So Reed Richards, I didn't see him as Reed Richards. Now that I've seen this movie, oh boy, was he Reed Richards. He nailed it. He's so perfect. And a lot of that had to do with the way the character was written. And then also Joseph Quinn, he was, out of the four of them, he was the one I was the least happy about the casting. I don't have anything against him. I didn't see him as Johnny Storm. And I think the Johnny Storm that they were presenting here wasn't the one that I was thinking of. This one was definitely the 60s, the early Johnny Storm. He had this 60s panache, confidence demeanor to him that many of the other iterations didn't have. Everybody loves the Chris Evans Johnny Storm, and that's because he's so big and larger than life and got charisma. This was the Johnny Storm that's not that. And that's, I think, why a lot of people didn't like this casting. Now that I see the movie, I understand that, this is the Johnny Storm that they're looking for. And Joseph nailed it. He was perfect. And I grew to like him in this. Still, of the four, he was my least favorite casting of it, but he did a stellar job. I'm very happy with that. Sue Storm and Ben Grimm. Those two were the two favorites in the casting before going into this, and they're still my favorite of the four. But it's pretty close between all of them. Sue Storm is just fantastic in it. Vanessa Kirby, she just rocket shipped the character out of this world, and she captured all of the things that are Sue Storm. she really is the heart of the family. She's actually more of the emotion of the family too. I mean, she is the very protective mother. She is sometimes irrational emotionally about things, but in a good way, in a way that's more human than say Reed would be. Reed is a lot more calculating, and that dynamic played very well between the two of them. And then the visuals of Ben Grimm, he visually was stunning. There was so many scenes where even it was just dialogue and they're going back and forth. And just to look at him, not only was he the epitome of Jack Kirby's The Thing that they had created, or even more so, I would say the John Buscema thing that was in the comics. He was just stunning to look at in not even like a dominating way, just like he's a big teddy bear that just feels comfortable to look at. I love the design of him. None of the previous Ben Grimms had nailed it. This is the one that is now the bar. And then, of course, you have Franklin Richards, which you may or may not have known just from the trailers. He is almost the MacGuffin of this. He is the most important character. And they do emphasize the fact that he is going to be one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe. Then, of course, you have the two main antagonists, Galactus and the Silver Surfer. Galactus had yet to be properly portrayed or even portrayed at all. I mean, he was a cloud in Rise of the Silver Surfer. Now, going into this, Ralph Innes was the one I was probably the most excited about the casting, in the which he has this just mesmerizing, spellbinding kind of presence, mostly because of his voice. He's in a bunch of the Robert Eggers movies. So he's in like Nosferatu. He's in The Northman, which is he's great in that. But I think he did the voice in the movie The Green Knight, and that's something like, if you ever seen that, it's almost the precursor to Galactus. He's very mystical and unworldly and creepy, but mostly is one of the best ways. But like in a larger than life way, godlike, almost like a demon. And even though he's a villain, there's this benevolence or omnibenevolence, as it were, to him that is just ungodly. Like my one complaint to the writing aspect of Galactus was he has this one moment, and they create this kind of mystery about him where he's ageless. Like they tested some of the material on him, and they're like, he's older than age. They're like, he's before the time of anything, which is accurate in the comics. In the comics, he's the only being in the Marvel universe that is a precursor to this current universe. So like there was the Big Bang and then the universe was created. He existed before that. And he makes this mention of he was a man, of your size before this. And I almost wish they hadn't said that. I wish that was left unsaid, because the mystery of him, I think, is better for the audience. But the fact that they mention that he's older than the universe or time itself, that was all that needed to be said. And I think if he said something a little more mysterious, because when they do go into the origin of him in the comics, it's not goofy, but it's a little too like, he was a scientist, Galen, I forgot what his name is, and he did some experiment, and then now he became this, and he was before the Big Bang, and he existed throughout it. Like, it's just weird. So I wish they left that out. They didn't, by the way, they didn't go too much into it. Like, it's not this like, long spelled out speech of his. There's just, there's a sentence that says it, that alludes to it. And I'm like, I wish they just kind of left that out.
Now, I know that we're not going to see the Norrin Radd Silver Surfer. We're going to see Shalabal, his love interest from the comics. So this is just another universe where, for whatever reason, Shalabal sacrificed herself instead of Norrin Radd. I'm okay with that, because I do expect we are going to see the true, real Silver Surfer in Norrin Radd in another one of these universes.
Thankfully, that big switch from Norrin Radd to Shalabal, which initially irked me a little bit, but then when I saw what they're doing with it, and I also it wasn't like they were gender swapping. These are two different characters, and there are tons and tons and tons of heralds of Galactus, so they could have chosen any one of them. The decision to make this herald that, introduces Galactus to Earth being Shalabal, now that I've seen the movie, I almost can't see it any other way. I'm glad this wasn't Norrin Radd's introduction, not because this was, less impactful or doesn't have the magnificence that it could. It's just that Shalabal as a female antagonist balanced out everything more than Norrin Radd would have. And there's really this great moment. There's several great moments between Johnny and Shalabal that you see in the movie that worked so much better that they had that plot device to work with instead of it just being, a male Silver Surfer and Johnny. So
Johnny loves space. Johnny loves women. Now there's a literal naked space woman, and Johnny thinks they had a moment.
I applaud their bold decision to make that plot change. And it does leave the door wide open for there to be the proper Norrin Radd Silver Surfer. In the past, because bear in mind, the Silver Surfer has been portrayed, most specifically the Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. And he's cool in that. I don't think the technology was where it needed to be. But most importantly, they did not portray that character of Norrin Radd properly. I mean, yeah, like if you read the comics, there's this introduction to him, and in the Coming of Galactus, the 3-part series, he has this arc to him in that small time that you've been introduced to him. But they didn't show that arc so much, and he's a very cold character in that. There's so much more to the Silver Surfer. I don't like how they show in this movie, they do show like kind of the origin of Shalabal and how she was this astronomer scientist on Zenla. I kind of wish they left that out or just implied it or just showed a visual of it. They didn't go too much into it at all, so it's not that damaging. But I did find the character emotionally to be pretty amazing. They did a really great job of capturing her and her empathy for the planet, because her planet went through what Earth is now going through, and her resistance to embracing that, which is what Johnny forces her to do, and then coming to terms with it. It was very beautifully done. And I really liked this Silver Surfer. And not to say, as I've said over and over again, the Silver Surfer is my favorite character in all of comic books and greatest superhero and on a biblical level. But like this one, I'm intrigued by, and I really like, and I appreciate the fact that I got to see this, and I want her to stick around. But at the same time, too, I do want to see my favorite character, Norrin Radd. So I'm hoping we see that at some time. Now, so here's what's just totally wild about this, and I love this. There's some action scenes with the Silver Surfer surfing through space. What a wild and crazy, awesome action scene, or should I say scenes, that showed her. They showed her powers. The Silver Surfer is just fucking awesome, and I can't be any more enthusiastic than I already am. I don't even want to say she was the highlight, because there was so many really great things about this movie, but that might have been one of them. I mean, holy crap, was she awesome. I love when she speaks. I love her voice. I love the acting by Julia Garner. I think she was beautifully cast if you're doing Shalabal versus Norrin Radd. And what wonderful writing of the character. They didn't do too much. They do leave you wanting way more of the Silver Surfer, which, of course, I do wish. Here's where one of my complaints are about the movie is there's this ending, and I won't give too much away, but there's her involvement in it is this little microscopic moment that's important, but I wish she had more to do in the final. They should have worked in a story where there's something going on with her and she's in the background, and they didn't have that. She just came out of nowhere. So that's one writing complaint. But other than that, wow, we really got to see an amazing Silver Surfer that I'm celebrating as we speak. Now, as for the other villains, and this is probably my biggest complaint about the movie, because the movie is somewhat short. I wished it could have been longer. The villains they mention in the movie are Mad Thinker, Mole Man, of course, Diablo, Giganto, Red Ghost, Puppet Master, and Wizard. I believe that they could have used almost all of these characters in that solution later on, because there is this moment where all of Earth comes together and Earth is working for the survival of all of mankind and all of the people on Earth, and Mole Man's implemented into that. I believe that all of these other characters could have been used because they have value. They could have done something to help. There is this moment as just a side thing that Reed Richards does where he's like, I'm just going to solve all the problems of all the villains. And he just kind of does it in like a sentence of like, and it works. It doesn't sound stupid, but he has cracked and had the police departments of New York City take down Diablo, Puppet Master, and Wizard just in the strike of an idea that he has. They don't go too much into it. There could have been more about them. There could have actually been like a site that was seized or he hadn't solved yet of like, say, Red Ghost and all of his apes still had this property. And when they're going through this, hey, let's save Earth, he realized that he needs to negotiate that with Red Ghost, or that could have been, the Wizard of Diablo owned it or whatnot. So they could have integrated that. It would have made the movie just another 15 minutes longer, which would have been great. And I'll say this, here's another complaint. The Mole Man, Paul Walter Hauser, was lauded as being, one of the great comic reliefs and a delight to see in the movie. I didn't find that. I found his character to be kind of out of place as far as his personality. So like the casting was fine, but the writing made for him to just kind of come in and say some stupid things and have some like smug attitude. The dialogue for him was kind of dumb, and I wasn't content with the scenes with him, in contrast to everybody else, critics and audiences saying that he was such a delight to see in it. I did not agree with that. And then some of the other characters that, and this is tight. Like, this is a really tight family. They did a fantastic job of showing the relationship between the four of these. They all have equal screen time. They all have equal importance. They're all just as smart as far as their contribution. With the exception of Ben. I mean, Ben's contribution is more of a rock. He's the solid part of the family that holds everything together, and he has like innate intelligence, more so than everybody else. Johnny, they made very smart he solves the language problem with him and Shalabal, which is brilliant. I love the way that was written. I love his contribution. And he really is the bratty brother, versus Sue being the heart and soul of the family, and then Reed being the leader. I love that. But the additional thing that they add with Herby is fantastic. Herby is one of my favorite characters in this. Herby was the equivalent to Superman's Krypto. However, I liked Herby better. Both of them, you don't know what the hell they're saying. One's barking and the other one's beeping. And he was very similar to like BB-8 from Star Wars, the sequel trilogies. I loved his character. He was so radically important. However, they do introduce another character played by Natasha Lyonne. And as much as I like her, I didn't like the inclusion of this character. I thought it was a side thing that was going on with Ben Grimm and her. What I don't understand is that character replaced Alicia Masters, who's in the comics and in many of the iterations. She's a blind woman that Thing has a relationship with. I don't know why they replaced that character, who's a staple in the comics, with this character that Natasha Lyonne was playing. She actually could have played that character, or would have made more sense. So I don't know why this no-name, not from the comics, created character was added. So the music, this is one where Fantastic Four blows Superman out of the water. Musically, it is huge. It was composed by Michael Giacchino, who's composed, he's got a pretty long record of composed music. He's even directed movies, but I had mentioned Star Trek, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. He did all the music in that, and the music in that is fantastic. And not only are the moments beautiful and heartfelt, but they're big. They grow, and there's a crescendo to so many of the scenes. So pre-seeing this movie, I've only seen the trailers, and there's that Fantastic Four. I found that to be the most annoying theme music gimmick that they had. And it's almost like they were trying to kind of sort of copy the idea of the original Superman, where like Superman, but the musical notes that are the melody, regardless if you say Fantastic Four, are not pleasant. Da, 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 da. However, let me put everybody at ease. You don't hear that in the movie pretty much ever. There's the very beginning where they do this intro and they're on a TV show, and the moments leading up to it, they do that melody, but they do it differently. It's slower and it's done a little more melodic. And then when the credits roll at the end, they do the whole Fantastic Four, and then the credits roll. And that's the only time you hear it. And that was the one thing I was so thankful for when I watched the movie, because the music really blew my mind. I was so impressed with the music. Visually, this is one of the most amazing movies I've seen in so long. I mean, it is wild. Similar to when the Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies came out, and you got to see kind of the aesthetic of it, because they kept that 60s look, and this has that. There's so many moments, especially in the middle of the movie, where they're going to see Galactus and they're overcoming some of these things in space that just look so visually awesome. And that's one of the big comparisons, I think, between Superman, because Superman did some things visually that were just wild, and the Fantastic Four First Steps. One of them is one of them is pop art, like Roy Lichtenstein. The other is like a Rembrandt. Two, you can explain all you want the aesthetics of those visually as being as great as they are, but they're two contrasting things. And I think artistically speaking, I think I like the Fantastic Four's visuals better. There's a couple of complaints I have with the visual effects, and they're super minor, but the baby, Franklin, there's times where they couldn't have used a real baby, of course. And there's moments where you're like, oh, the visual effects there are a little off. It didn't take you out of the scene as much as so many scenes with Ben Grimm. I'm just like, wow, he looks so cool. The special effects in some of those scenes where he's standing and talking to people and has clothes on looked a little off. Threw me for a second, but it's not that bad. And those really are the only two special effects complaints I have. Other than that, it's going to wow the hell out of you. There are two scenes where Sue gives this speech to the people of New York, or the people of Earth, I should say, that was extremely impactful and so well executed and acted and whatnot. I feel like she left a couple of important things out that really would, because I don't buy that everybody would have been on board with what she's saying, because they all kind of come together like, yeah, we're a big family, everybody on Earth, and we all got to stick together and we're going to solve this together. I don't buy that all of the Earthlings would have been on board with what she said. What she said was that the Galactus had asked for their child. She's not willing to give up their child. All of Earth is like, well, tough shit. Like, it's either your child or all of Earth. She left out the fact that that's now off the table. That's not an option. Their immediate reaction was, no, you can't have our child, which would have been most people's reaction. And once they said that, Galactus took it off the table. That is like, I'll spare Earth if you give me the child. Now that they said no, he's taking both. And she neglected to mention that. I think that's an important thing for everyone to understand. Like, we don't have the option of giving the child to Galactus anymore. I mean, he's coming and taking him. And then there's the other aspect of they certainly should not have trusted Galactus to have kept his end of the bargain if they turned over the child. Who's to say he wouldn't have eaten Earth anyway? She neglected to mention that. I think those are important things to have told all of Earth when they're all, because it's almost like, Pitchforks and Frankenstein movie where they're all coming after the Fantastic Four because they feel like they're holding back the one thing that would save all of mankind. And it wasn't exactly the case. And then there's also Franklin Richards does save the day to a certain extent. The whole moment leading up to what Franklin did was completely projected. Oh, he's going to do that. He's going to do it. 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 I wish they hadn't done that. I wish there was a surprise. And you're like, oh shit, he can do that? That would have been more impressive. You know, as far as the Marvel movies go, I do have it pretty high up. It's like 12 or 13 out of all the Marvel movies. You know, it's right there with like the first Spider-Man movie as far as where I place it. It has this tight, like, because it didn't have all of these other MCU characters intertwined in it, it felt tight like the first Iron Man movie as far as its core characters, or the first Doctor Strange movie, or even the first two Ant-Man movies. It was tight like that, and it's going to be remembered like that. In my conclusion, both of these movies are just awesome. Two of the best movie-going experiences. So to do a quick comparison of some of the things that are there, story-wise, you know, it's very, I almost want to say a tie with the story, because there's things that one has to do that the other didn't need to do. Superman is telling you 87 years worth of pop culture. Superman, this was really only telling one story, the coming of Galactus, that was in the 60s. It had the essence of the 60s Fantastic Four. It was true to that. It was tighter in that one story and that one little magnifying glass of time for these characters versus Superman being 87 years of it. So both of them nailed it. Character-wise, it's close. It really is close. I mean, Superman was so perfectly cast, and this was close to perfectly cast. They did things that I wouldn't have done, that they were smarter than me in casting these characters. There were more people to cast. I think the casting of Galactus out of all the characters in both the movies was probably the best. But then you got like David Cornsweet as Superman is really impressive, you know, second to Galactus. So I don't know, you know, I'm undecided there. One's dark, one's bright. Musically, Fantastic Four beats Superman. Story-wise, I think Superman impressed me a little bit more because it did things that I didn't know how to do. I was like, how would you have done this? And James Gunn's like, here's how you do it. Versus the Fantastic Four stayed pretty true to the source material for the most part. I think Superman wins that category. Acting-wise, I think, you know, I'm going to give it like the 1% edge to Superman just because of Rachel Brosnahan being so super impressive. It's close. I mean, here's the thing, like this is a very tight race. Here's my tiebreaker. So my tiebreaker is going to be that when I walked out of both these movies, I had a different feeling. Both of them were as exceptional. However, when I walked out of Superman, I had a giant smile on my face. My day was brightened. I couldn't wait to go see it again. I was so happy. I was so thoroughly entertained. The Fantastic Four was a lot more thought-provoking, and I had a more serious demeanor when I walked out of there. So that's going to be the tiebreaker. I'm going to give the edge to Superman based on that whole feeling that I had when I walked out of it, because there's nothing better than fun and happy and smiles than, you know, serious thought-provoking experience coming out of it. But damn, were these two freaking close as hell. So, and hey, call me in a year, I might have a completely different opinion, but you know, I almost feel like this is a cop-out. I wasn't going to do that to you guys as an audience and say like, it was a tie. I had to pick one. So, you know, gun to my head, I'm picking Superman, but damn, these are two really great movies that came out. In my opinion, there is no superhero fatigue. There's just shitty movie fatigue because some of these are great and some of these aren't great. The only problem with Thunderbolts was that it didn't have any marquee characters. Nobody's going to see, you know, Red Guardian, or no, you know, no one gives a rat's ass about the second Black Widow. Like there's no household names in it. So I think that hurt it, but because it was great, that could help Fantastic Four or even Superman in this case, because people are like, oh, it was good. It seems like they're producing a good product for us to see. So, but all in all, I got to tell you, you know, Fantastic Four was great. That's my take on it. If you haven't seen it, you know, I hope you go and you check it out in the theater. It needs to be seen on the big screen. Same goes for Superman. I'd love to hear from you and your take. Which of these films did you like better? What did you like and dislike about each of them? I want to thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'm Foxy Sellers. If you would, click like, click subscribe. By subscribing, it does help my channel. However, it will notify you of future videos that I produce. Thanks again for watching.